Welcome to my channel. If you're here, is I assume because you are interested in Unity high performance development. And today we will treat something that we haven't, or at least I have not, publicly talked about on YouTube yet. I normally leave the things for the membership. So the topic today will be how to build and scale your own performance lab. What do I mean by that? Let me give you a bit of context. I do Unity performance consulting, so that means I help studios just reach the performance targets they have, usually frame rate, loading times, crashes, ANRs, or application not responding, all this stuff. Which means because I work with so many clients and so many different projects and so many platforms, I end up having like dozens of devices, like physical hardware, right? I'm talking about iOS, Android, Windows, and sometimes even consoles, right? Like this. Look here, I have my Steam Deck around here because lately I'm doing a lot of Steam Deck, but also Nintendo Switch and all these things. So I don't know your specific case, but even if you do not work as a freelancer, you will end up working in different projects, right? And different projects, and hence different clients, will always have different performance targets on different hardware targets, right? So what's the solution to this? If you do this professionally on a daily basis, you work with a lot of different projects, a lot of different clients, then there is no way around it. You will end up just like me, with dozens of devices, right? And you will not use all of them often at all. Like some devices, I think I have just had them in the shelf laying there for 1 year or even 2 years, I think. But when the time comes, you need it. Just like all the Oculus Quests that I have there. I have the one, the second, and the third one. Why? Because sometimes just a new client or a new project just pops up and needs it. There is no way around it. You need the storage space. However, let's be pragmatic. Maybe you don't need so much variety. No? Maybe that happens. Maybe you just work on a couple of projects and you just want the 80-20. If that's the case, I suggest you have maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 devices per category. The most different devices. Like for Android, you could go, I don't know, for a Samsung S14, an S20, and an S26. I don't know, something like this. Obviously, it doesn't need to be Samsung, just giving you some ideas, okay? It can also be, obviously, Google Nexus and all that stuff. Same for iOS. And when it comes to Windows, I think the 80-20 is really to have a couple of devices. But if you really want to stretch it, limit that to one device, my suggestion here is to go for a laptop that has switchable GPU. So a laptop that has a decent integrated GPU. AMD has really a lot of those, like a 680M, 780M, or something like this is a good starting point, but also that has a dedicated GPU. Here's a bit more like your choice depending on your budget. Could be a 3050, 4060, 5080. It really depends on what you expect to be doing in terms of work. And then you can just switch between them according to your needs, right? So in terms of GPU, you are covered by that decision if you go for a switchable GPU. Now, there is more layers to this, because often enough you just need to test a couple of things. Like 90% of the time it's either a worse or a better CPU and a worse or a better GPU. And if you wanted to have all possible combinations, you would just not have enough money to buy all these devices. So yes, you can switch between integrated and dedicated GPU, but there is more things you can do about this so that you don't end up spending $100K on devices. And what I want you to think about here is that you can also scale the performance of your existing hardware. How do we do this? I'm gonna show this to you very briefly on my computer. Just go. It's very simple. It's super stupidly simple, but I don't see anybody do this. So I'm here to give you this advice for you. It's just gonna be useful for your career. I don't know if you can see my screen because obviously the screen is pretty bad, but you can just go Windows in the open the choose your power plan, okay, and here you have a list of plans. Just go for whatever plan you have selected. Go to change plan settings, go and click change advanced power settings. And here, normally, if you have up-to-date drivers, normally the chipset drivers, you have the processor power management. Here, what you can do is to change the maximum processor state so that maybe by setting it to 50%, you just change the maximum frequency of your CPU. So you're on the same architecture, but effectively what you're doing is capping the maximum frequency of your CPU in this case. This way, you can just test, or you can use this as a proxy device. You can test for hardware that is lower power than yours by forcing an artificial frequency cap. Does it make sense? I hope it does. Okay, it's super simple and stupid, but sometimes the simple, stupid things are the easiest and most effective things to do in game performance, all right? So that you can do. No need to buy a device that's half as powerful as your own device, because now you can basically scale, all right? Now, what else can you do in terms of the GPU? Because yes, you can switch between iGPU or DGPU, but even then, sometimes you need something in between. What can you do here? It's very simple. You have, normally, depending on your vendor, you have different possibilities here. You have BIOS level. In the BIOS, you can set often a maximum budget in watts for your GPU if we are talking about an integrated GPU or iGPU. You can say like something like 25 watts or 10 watts, something like this. Sometimes you can only set the package power for the entire chipset. You can just do this, and this is specifically for laptops most of the time. Yes, I know some desktops also have some iGPU, but normally they are just, you know, for running Windows and checking YouTube. That's it, not really for gaming. But for laptops, you normally have quite powerful iGPUs, and you can set this budget on the BIOS level, so you can just make it lower powered or higher powered by changing the maximum watts or wattage assigned to your GPU. Another way to do this is using software on Windows. I don't know what you have, but I work mostly with AMD, and with AMD you have tools like Ryzen Master, you also have MSI Afterburner, you also have even I think G Helper. I think initially it was more like for Asus laptops, but I think it just works as long as you have an AMD mobile chipset. And there you can just set the maximum wattage of different parts of your chipset, I believe including your GPU. So this is also just a different way to underclock or overclock your GPU and even CPU. So the result is that you don't need dozens of devices anymore. Maybe it's just enough to have 2 Windows devices and that's it, as long as you keep it flexible. Obviously, when you say that your minimum specs are this, this, and this, when you are launching a Steam game, for example, then you should obviously test exactly on that device. But for the remaining of the work, that's gonna be just enough. Why? Because it's extremely easy to iterate on this. You just change one slider and then suddenly you are in a different hardware tier. Yes, you're still possibly in a better architecture or something like this, but this is just a good enough proxy for you to just do all your performance tests without having dozens of devices or even switching between those, right? Something else that happens to help a lot, at least me in my consulting business, is to have a remote desktop software like Parsec. Okay, it's pretty much optimized for games, and you can just have like 3 or 4 devices in parallel on your table and just control all of them through your main computer. That helps a lot when you are running parallel performance tests and you need to measure performance on different hardware tiers, right? Just like I do with all these projects. You just don't have one single target. Okay, sometimes you have a minimum spec with the lower settings. You have maybe another tier, which is the recommended specs with medium graphical levels, and then you have another setup for, I don't know, something like a 5080 or 5090 for top tier graphic settings. And then you can just run all of these things in parallel. Okay, we do this all the time with our own performance lab. So hope this advice helps you, just like it helps us. Like, I cannot really get away with doing this all the time because I have so many clients and so many projects that I really need to have these devices. But most of the time you want to be pragmatic and you should be just sticking to the 80-20 rule. Just have a couple of devices that are super flexible and do this 2-tier approach to changing the scaling of your performance. That way you are covered in 80% of your cases by having just a couple of devices, and that's gonna help you a lot with all your projects. I hope that makes sense, and let me know what you think in the comments. If you guys need some consulting help in your studio, if you want me to have a look at your projects, then just go to the link in the description and then we can set up a call. All right, take care.